Can money really buy happiness? Well, for some, it seems like it might. Son of billionaire Warren Buffett, Howard Buffett, has spent much of his life throwing his dollars around to make the Illinois city of Decatur his personal playground. This is according to reporting in The Laver. Over the past few decades, the Howard Buffett Foundation reportedly spent over $200 million in a city of 70,000 people to make his dreams reality, funding many assets in the town so he could call them his own, including donating money to build a law enforcement hub in the city, only for Howard to become sheriff of a county in Decatur, the same town where the Howard G. Buffett Foundation now sits.
However, while his donations bought him political fame, it is unclear if this has made Howard Buffett immune to challengers. Journalist Amos Barshad joins us now to tell us more about his time in Decatur and what he learned about how Buffett took Decatur by storm. Welcome, Amos.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so some people might say, okay, one of the son of the richest man in the world, one of the richest men in the world, has taken an interest in a small and declining town, trying to make it a better place. Why might people be skeptical of his involvement in this town of 70,000 people or so?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very fair point. And yeah, I would encourage anyone to read the piece and to kind of learn for themselves. You know, my hope was to report the facts as I learned them and to figure out exactly what it means. I think there's many people in the town that are definitely very appreciative of his spending. And then there's some people that feel that, yeah, he has bought political capital with the spending. Specifically, a lot of that is tied up in a conversation that occurred locally around the opening of a dispensary after Illinois legalized marijuana statewide. There was some reasons to believe that through his influence, he helped basically shut down the dispensary. And so, yeah, I just spent some time with some activists and some, local people who are really involved in the community. And they told me their stories, and they told me how it felt to live within this town where that there's a person who has taken this profound interest in your town. He was raised in Nebraska, where his famous father is from, and so it's almost this happenstance thing. He came to town in the 90s to work for a agriculture giant, Archer Daniel Midlands, as an executive, and since then he's spent a lot of money in all kinds of different ways. Really, you can go on the Howard G. Buffett Foundation website and read the annual reports. He spends money all over the world, so this is just one more place that he has an interest. But for me, I felt what was valuable is to learn and hear from people who live in this town to find out what it feels like when that there's a very, 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 very rich person who is pushing your town in certain directions.
Tell us more about the actions he took with respect to this marijuana dispensary. I want marijuana to be legal. I think it should be your right to, take buy whatever substances you want. And it sounds like the people of the town thought so as well. And then he took some actions because he's personally opposed to it, perhaps, to stymie that political development.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, if in this town, what was interesting to me was that the pro-dispensary sentiment that I heard wasn't even necessarily a personal idea of, I want to go buy marijuana. It was really about, this is going to be a reliable tax revenue generator. There had been this history with this mall that wasn't built in the 70s that a lot of people locally still felt that the city council at that time had made a mistake. And it felt a lot of people just were drawing the parallel with that. Like, this is our opportunity to create a local institution, tax generator. It really, really wasn't about, I want to be able to drive to buy marijuana. It was about what's best for our community, and Howard Buffett's personal tendency, I think, not to speak for him, but my understanding is he has kind of an old school, belief in the war on drugs. And has a personal feeling backed up by research that he believes in, that marijuana is bad for communities. So effectively what happened, and this was found through some public information requests by local activists, they were able to discover the manner in which he was kind of peppering these city council officials with information, encouraging them to vote against the dispensary. They also were able to find this invitation to a meeting with a lot of local power brokers, the mayor, the then Macon County Sheriff, the police chief. And he kind of called them together soon after marijuana was legalized statewide, knowing that this next, conversation would be, are we going to have a dispensary in Decatur? And, we don't know what happened in that meeting, and we don't know exactly if and when exactly it occurred, but we know he invited all these people with the intention of presumably influencing to his point of view, which by the facts on the ground is what he was able to do later on. Once the dispensary was voted down, certain city council members effectively acknowledged that they did not feel comfortable voting for it, considering what Buffett's foundation had done locally. There's also an interesting other element to it, which kind of comes back to what you guys were talking about, the idea of, well, is this necessarily bad that he spent all this money? So part of what he spent was on a major addiction recovery center, which I think everyone that I spoke to was in support of. The services that they provide are great. The interesting thing kind of came about when the mayor at some point basically said she didn't feel comfortable voting for the dispensary, while at the same time there's an addiction recovery center. So it just was this kind of interesting dynamic where the idea is, we'll treat people once they're addicted, but we're not going to do anything to, help them get marijuana, which I think have seen through research is not a harmful service to provide to a community.
Yeah, this does seem, if we can take the step back and generalize this a little bit more broadly than what is going on in Decatur specifically, it seems like a little bit of a cautionary tale or a microcosm of what many on the left are talking about when they raise concerns about the influence and the anti-democratic influence of big money, even if it's kind of big charity. And you do see some of this critique from the right as well, usually centered around particular big donors like George Soros, let's say. But from the left's argument tends to be that relying overly on charity or the benevolence of a handful of billionaires will have the exact effect of what we're seeing here in Decatur, which is that even though some of the spending is arguably for very good things that people in the town like and appreciate, that is part of why it's a problem, because then things that are objected to by the majority of the population and which would be shut down on any kind of democratic basis are not objected to, because the positive gifts to the town could be stripped away. And people are caught into this vice grip of saying, well, if I want the dollars to keep flowing, I have to basically concede to the demands of this benevolent billionaire. And in this case, you write in your article that he even managed to finagle his way perhaps illegally or unofficially into being a law enforcement official in the town, literally running around as though it was his own personal fiefdom. Is that the example? Is that the lesson that you hope people take away from your article?
I think that there's a lot to question when it comes to anyone who's able to spend so freely. And I use a phrase that I think is applicable, this idea of world building. When you have this kind of money and when you've devoted yourself to becoming this kind of philanthropist, you are able to shape the nature of a community. So to go back to the addiction center for a minute, objectively a great thing to have, but is that necessarily what the community needed? Was there any kind of idea of this is what we want to spend money on, this is what the institutions we want to build? Same with the police training center that he has there. Is this what they want, or is this what Howard Buffett wants? I mean, I think it's clear that the answer is the latter, and I think it's clear that he gets to build these things because he has the money. It's just I think somewhat disconcerting, I would imagine, and from what I heard from Decatur residents, to feel that you live in this town that you and your points of view aren't necessarily being heard. I mean, specifically with the dispensary, some of the activists were able to get a referendum about the dispensary in Decatur Township, which is a kind of a smaller municipality that Decatur encompasses, and the referendum, won handily, 62%. So I think there's actual evidence that the people of Decatur wanted this and they weren't able to have it. And I think that's kind of, the through line is when someone has a lot of money and is able to shape institutions to their will, where does that leave a community? What point are they able to come in and say, well, actually, we'd like you to spend your money this way, or we'd like you to spend your money that way? The truth is that, they don't, right? They're shut out of that process because it's a personal, it's a, private individual making their choices. I just think it is interesting to think about, the way we all probably as regular people feel sometimes, that there's more powerful, more influential people making decisions that affect our daily lives. And that's why, for me, the experience in Decatur was kind of really so interesting, is because it felt like an opportunity to really see that in action.
Amos Barshad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.